Hello and welcome to On the Move, a show about what's going on in Hampton Roads featuring community leaders who are moving the region forward. I'm Thomas Becker with Hampton Roads Transit, and today we welcome Ray Amoruso. He is HRT's Chief Planning and Development Officer. Ray is retiring after some 44 years in transportation nationwide and 16 years with HRT. And during that time, he oversaw significant growth and change to improve transit for Hampton Roads. Welcome, Ray.
Thank you, Tom. Happy to be here.
So let's start from the top. What is the role of a planning and development in a transit agency?
That's a great question. Specifically in Hampton Roads Transit, planning and development is exactly what it says. We do all the planning for service for our 68 bus routes, bus stops, long-range planning for high-capacity transit investments such as light rail or bus rapid transit. But also within the planning and development department is customer service, where we deal with calls that come in every day from the passengers that use HRT services, either to provide information or to handle complaints or compliments. Overall, we also are responsible for reporting critical information to the Federal Transit Administration as required.
Our governing body, yes.
Our governing body, because we're a recipient of federal funds related to ridership and other key statistics on an annual basis.
Share with us some misconceptions about transit planning. Now, I know locally, one of the things is because in the 6 cities we serve, it's up to the cities to decide where we operate and how. That must be pretty frustrating.
Yeah, as you mentioned, I've been in this business for 44 years and worked for both public and private sector. And I will tell you, Hampton Roads and Hampton Roads Transit specifically has a unique way that they fund service. The cost allocation agreement was set in place with the merger of Pentran and TRT back in 1999 that basically laid out in a written format how each of the 6 member cities we either share in revenues that come to the agency from a variety of funding sources, whether it's federal, state, or discretionary grants, but also how they would share in the expenses. So we are a regional transit authority that provides regional service to the member cities. But in actuality, what we do because of the cost allocation agreement is that we contract individually on an annual basis for service with each city, which each city pretty much tells us what they would like to pay for and run year over year.
We have 6 masters, right?
6 masters. We're a regional authority in name only.
Now, how has planning and development for transit changed over the years, not just here, but nationwide?
Well, the glory days for transit, we would go back to pre-World War II and during World War II. Transit ridership reached its peak immediately after World War II in 1947 in terms of people that were using transit for mobility needs such as going to work. 1 out of 4 people used transit, which is a phenomenal number in the country at the time. And then something unique happened in the 1950s. There was a dismantling a lot of the streetcar systems, interurban rails, and what we call today light rail. You may have all heard about the Big Red in LA. They had one of the most robust transit rail systems in the country at the time. And GMC came in and started marketing rubber-tired solutions, what we call a bus today, as a better way to move people around that are not in a single occupant vehicle. So no longer dependent upon fixed rail, but rather a rubber-tired solution can leave a route pattern and go elsewhere in neighborhoods. And by the late 1960s, there were practically no light rail systems or fixed rail systems left in the country, and everyone had shifted toward bus. But it's really funny about transit ridership. We ebb and flow against 2 key factors. The price of gasoline in the country. The more the gas prices go up, the more ridership tends to come back. There's so many people who use automobiles that are right at the margin of being able to afford automobile ownership between insurance and taxes and gasoline prices and maintenance of the vehicle, that if prices start to climb between $3.50 and $4 a gallon, ridership goes up. So that's one thing. Then redevelopment patterns have changed. The onset of the interstate system in the 1950s and 60s encouraged development patterns that spread growth out to suburban communities and neighborhoods and what we used to call cul-de-sac communities. But this generation, this new generation, really wants to live in a radius of 15 minutes where they live, work, and play within a small 15-minute radius of where they live. And what they're looking for is a robust transit system. So
and we see that. We've got
that.
our Student Rider Commission. I know my own son, who is an architect, young, just started out. He chose a place so he can walk and take transit.
Right.
And he's telling me about terms like transit-oriented development, which, why don't you tell us what that is a little bit?
So transit-oriented development, TOD, is a nomenclature we use for focusing growth, planned growth with the private sector, the development community, to encourage a denser growth pattern. Now, we're not talking New York City style denser growth patterns, but in which a nodal activity center, translation, a light rail station or a major passenger facility that has a lot of routes that come together for bus routes, is the heartbeat or the center of that development. And we have some living examples of that down right now in the city of Chesapeake, at Summit Point, city of Virginia Beach at the town center, and of course the oldest and most organic, I'll say, is downtown Norfolk, where the Central Business District has over 35,000 people who work in the Central Business District every day. Oyster Point and the Peninsula as well is another fine example. So it's focusing development in partnership with the development community. You might incentivize the development community to have lower parking ratios and parking minimums in exchange for building communities that are both retail-oriented, commercial-oriented, but also residential-oriented around a transit nodal activity center.
Have you found that we've been part of that conversation in the Hampton Roads early on in urban development?
In Hampton Roads, it's a bit difficult. The cities, which frankly they're in competition with each other to attract a new business or new residential growth. So they may incentivize a developer to build a development that's not in lockstep with transit needs. They may forget about the fact that there is no route or bus stop nearby that transit development, then come back to us after it's been built and say, our residents, our businesses who have employers coming here need transit service. So it's been a difficult journey. Some cities are really coming to the table now. Some of our member cities are coming to the table thinking ahead of time before the development plan is approved, Tom, that says, what can we do for transit to help complement this new business is coming in to help complement? But if you look back to the early 2000s, it was rampant growth without a thought of transit, and it was always an afterthought.
Yeah.
Different around the country, but here it's coming very slowly.
Well, let's build on that. What improvements have you seen in transit, over the years? You were instrumental or you were a consultant actually before joining HRT for the Tide. The Tide, of course, being a high-profile mode, but we're multimodal too. So what are some success stories over the years?
Well, I remember early on when we started talking about the alignment, once Virginia Beach decided not to move forward with light rail in their city, Norfolk came to HRT at the time and said, we'd like to go it alone, and we'd like you to figure out what is the most ideal alignment that can get us from one end of the city to the other. And some of the success stories were built around the original footprint in the early 2000s of the Eastern Virginia Medical Center complex, which actually is home to 5 different medical institutions, EVMC, Children's Hospital, King's Daughters, Norfolk Centera Heart Hospital, as well as Norfolk General. And then across the street at Fort Norfolk, which they had a master plan for growth in the senior community, they wanted that anchored by a light rail station at the end of the line. And I remember big success stories in downtown Norfolk at the Monticello Avenue station. The predecessor to Wells Fargo was Wachovia Bank. They decided to locate their bank headquarters, Wachovia, right across the street from the Monticello station. And then Wells Fargo came on board and took over the bank and also was there. It was a great synergy at Harbor Park to have a station at our AAA ball field. And now we have the casinos coming, which is really fantastic. I suspect the casino's going to want longer hours of service since they're a 24-hour operation. We're looking at, we always had said the Tide facility was a starter line, that its east end anchor over at the city line of Virginia Beach and Norfolk at Newtown Road. We always knew that was going to be the end of line station. And here's Norfolk stepping forward and saying, we're redeveloping the old Military Circle Mall property, and we like to swing light rail around to connect to the redevelopment of that site, so it would have a true eastern end anchor, similar to what we have at EBMC. So it's not a success story that's happened, but one that's blossoming right in front of our eyes right now. So the tide will be a string of pearls of development opportunities along the alignment.
And other things that you've been here for and helped grow is the 757 Express, the Base Express shuttle bus too. So tell us about those successes as you look back.
And Tom, I'm glad you brought that up, because the above the fold, if anybody still reads the newspaper, stories always seems to be light rail. But truly, we are a bus company first and foremost. We operate 68 routes, the Navy-based circulator, 2, soon to be 4, demonstrations of microtransit service, which are demand responsive services. But it's kind of like the Rodney Dangerfield. It doesn't get the respect it should, because light rail always attracts the headlines. But by and large, we're a bus company, and we run bus service. And it's a really good thing to have a robust transit network that connects people to work, to shopping, to schools, to medical appointments. So it's really interesting that the Navy-based circulator, which we applied for a grant through the state, has been wildly successful in connecting military personnel over at Naval Station Norfolk and getting them distributed around the base, which is a large installation of over 50 acres, to the various points of offices and residential areas. And that's a game changer, because it's a federal installation. None of our member cities ever wanted to provide funding for transit service on the base, because it said it was a responsibility of the federal government. And here, in partnership with the state, we found a unique way to fund a circulator that does distribute the sailors and personnel on the base without having them to drive to the base, which parking is a challenge at Naval Station Norfolk.
I know the Navy is very complimentary of that service, so that's really a hallmark of your contribution. So the 757 Express.
757 Express.
More to come, I would imagine, in the future. More to come.
So thank you, members of the General Assembly in 2020 passed, for the first time in this agency's history, a dedicated source of funding for a high-frequency network of backbone bus service on 13 different routes. These are our stellar performers of the 68 routes that we operate. They carry the most people to basically jobs. And they provided enough funding to provide 15-minute high-frequency service that you no longer have to look at your watch, if anybody still wears a watch, about, did I miss the bus, which only runs once an hour. Now you can have another bus come by in 15 minutes. This is a really exciting program, because it's outside the cost allocation agreement, that we can match the span of the service day, so it's the same no matter what city you're in. The frequency will be the same, and the span of the service week, meaning how many days a week you operate, all 7 days, running roughly from 5 a.m. till midnight in all 6 cities. And we don't have to ask permission from those member cities to fund that service. There are 3 routes that have been implemented today, the Route 112 and 114 in the peninsula, and the Route 20 on Virginia Beach Boulevard on the south side. And each of them had experienced significant ridership growth of between 45 and 70% since the implementation of high-frequency service. We expect that to be the same for the remaining 10 routes, which the only thing holding us back in this 5 minutes is the need for additional bus operators.
Is this one of those build it and they will come moments?
I truly believe it is, that there's a latent demand for better frequency of service. It's no different than, if I use the analogy of, let's build another lane of highway to relieve our capacity problem. And what they've discovered over the years is that no matter how many lanes of traffic, there's a latent demand waiting out there to fill that void, that you're right back at level of service ERF or traffic congestion. I believe 15-minute service is going to be so successful that the latent demand of people in the fringe of considering using transit will now use transit, because it's a higher frequency and they can depend on HRT. So it's a really win-win for transit in this region.
I know 16 years at HRT is a lot, but what are some of your favorite memories? Or achievements? What are you proud of, right?
So I'm going to just give a little precursor to that. 16 years as an employee of HRT, but I was a consultant serving this agency since 1997. I was living in New Jersey at the time and flying back and forth to serve the agency as a consultant. And the big effort was the Norfolk to Virginia Beach light rail proposal that would have run transit from where the old Kern Library was in downtown Norfolk all the way out to the ocean front along the old Norfolk Southern right-of-way. And I remember coming down here as someone who grew up with transit in the Northeast and learning quickly, people down here back then didn't think of transit the way people up in the Northeast think of transit. And it was disheartening in some of my initial public meetings in Virginia Beach to hear some of the comments I was hearing about, no one will ever use it. I'm never going to use it. Why would I use it? You're mortgaging the future for building this. But what I learned along the way that the influence of the military in this region has brought people into this region who chose to live here that have experienced robust transit systems elsewhere in the country and asking the question, why not here?
Right.
And why don't we have it in Virginia Beach? Now, along the way, there's been many trials and tribulations, ups and downs, and delivering light rail to Virginia Beach has been 3 separate non-binding advisory referendums for city councils over the years I've been associated. The first one in 1999, which failed, and that's what led to Norfolk saying, we'll go it alone. And then there was another one that passed, and then there was another one in 2016 that failed yet again. We were going to take a 3-mile extension to the town center. So those are some distinct memories because of how much time and effort we put in to educate the public about the value of high-capacity transit. But it was exciting times in delivering as a planner. For those that don't know, the opportunity you get working for public sector is cradle to grave. As a consultant, you're hired to do a job and then you're out and you never see the fruition of your work. As a public sector employee, and I've had my 44-year career, it's been about half and half, you see it from planning, through engineering, through construction, and through implementation. And my most fondest memories of the day we opened the light rail in August 2011, seeing the lines of people that came out, standing on that line in Newtown Road on a sweltering 97-degree August day, handing out bottles of water, and people that came out to experience this thing called light rail because it doesn't exist in Virginia, and getting such eye-awakening, what I'm trying to say is statements about, wow, this was interesting, I'd like to use it again, and then try to go to a ball game. And it was just, you could see it in their faces. They never thought of transit that way. And then that's the gateway to using the bus system. If you can capture on transit, on high-capacity transit, and they have a good experience, they'll start to use transit, a rubber-tired solution in transit. So those are some of my fondest memories. There were difficult times as well. I'm not sugarcoating anything, but that was really exciting. And then really exciting is this effort with the Hampton Roads Regional Transportation Fund that through the General Assembly to deliver high-frequency service.
So as a planner, you don't always see the end result, in which case the tide must have been really fulfilling.
Really fulfilling.
To see the rubber hit the road, well, I guess the rail hit the wheel. Yeah.
I've had that one other time in my career, and that was at Denver RTD. I worked all the way through planning, design, and engineering for the first extension of the light rail from the original starter line. But by the time construction was completed, I had already left Denver RTD. But they invited me back in 2000 to see the opening, and they honored me for the early work in the project, recognizing me. So it's really, as a planner, a unique opportunity to see something that you took from a piece of paper on a plan to real-world use and experience. You alluded to some of the changes over the years, but how has public transit changed, in your career? That's a great question, Tom. So in my career, it depends what part of the country you're in.
Sure.
I'll start with the Northeast. If you grew up in Boston, Philadelphia, New York,
everyone's on it.
Everyone's on it and uses it and would think you're crazy if you were going to drive to Midtown Manhattan in a car and pay for parking. But as I moved around the country, working for Denver RTD, which was the New West, the pioneering spirit they used to call it, the willingness to try transit and build high-capacity transit was unique. When I went to work as a consultant in Dallas and Houston, the ultimate car cities. I mean, when you think of Houston, you think of 8-lane freeways and huge impediments to pedestrian transit-friendly movements. They built light rail in their downtown on Main Street. And then Dallas adopted a referendum and passed a sales tax referendum to build a robust system. Now they have, I think it's 5 different light rail lines. Then I got to the South, if you want to consider Hampton Roads part of the South, because it's very different in Northern Virginia. And what I found in my own observation is that they weren't quite up to speed on what transit could do and who uses transit. Frankly, a lot of people are still stuck in the mentality of the 1950s.
Yeah.
Transit's for those people, not for me. I'm an automobile user. I would never use transit. I've met people who sincerely expressed, I live in Virginia Beach all my life. I've never been to Norfolk. Why do I need to go to Norfolk? And I would look at them perplexed. That would be like me saying, oh, I grew up in Queens, but why would I go to Manhattan? I would never go to Manhattan. So transit, in my opinion, over the years is being, especially with this new generation that's coming into the workforce, has gained an appreciation of, I can be without the expense of an automobile, without insurance and taxes and repair prices. And
It's about 9 to 12 grand a year.
yeah, and I can use transit, get to my job, and get home on time, reliably, without the trouble of having an automobile, worrying about traffic congestion and leaving extra time, worrying about will I get in a car accident today, and anything else associated with the automobile. So this young generation has really stepped forward and said, stop building roads, stop building lanes, give us more robust transit. And that's really exciting to see as we look down the road.
That piggybacks on my next question is, what does the future of public transportation look like? Here we've talked a little bit about our on-demand ride-sharing, microtransit in transit speak. In many ways, that is a future component. But what else is in the hopper?
Well, let's talk a little bit about demand responsive services or microtransit. Not every fixed route performs the way other fixed routes do, and some have been in place for literally since streetcar times without questioning, is it really necessary to have 12 to 14 hours of service once an hour in bi-direction when you're only carrying 8 or 10 people per trip? And microtransit, demand responsive service, is a game changer. The technology is now there at the touch of your phone, just like Uber or Lyft, to make a reservation, to be picked up at a virtual bus stop and to get you to your destination without the expense of fixed route service. So that's a game changer that is being embraced by transit agencies around the country and wholeheartedly being invested, because it's a cost effective to do microtransit when fixed route service and that expense isn't warranted, but also kind of addresses what the customer wants. Yeah. The technology is advanced now that we can, at our fingertips, call up transit service, just like you do in Uber or Lyft, and get picked up and get to your destination. So that's a big game changer in transit. And fixed route service will always be there, don't get me wrong. But the other thing that I think has had a large impact is micromobility with electric scooters. Here in Norfolk, it's the Lime. Bike lanes and pedestrian American with Disabilities Act compliant sidewalks. All of these micromobilities having an integrated network of bikes, micro vehicles like scooters and buses, all have a place in the sun, so to speak, in the fabric of the public right-of-way. Again, in the 50s and 60s, the car was king, everything else was put to the side, and that includes human beings. Yeah. There are intersections that are, you take your life in your hands, even in this region, to cross, because they time the signals to work for the automobile, not for the pedestrian. So it's been slowly changing from 1970 to 1990, but in the 2000s, we really start to see an embrace of a comprehensive, holistic network that covers all forms of transportation, not just the automobile. Yeah. So that's a big change.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to see that. As you said, the young folks, you've got great examples of transit-oriented development. Charlotte comes to mind, and some parts of Norfolk as well. And I think that is a future to embrace for sure. You're leaving big shoes to fill. Tell us a little bit about the planning development staff that's going to carry on your work.
I leave with a heavy heart. I mean, everyone I see in the hallway today keep asking me, are you really leaving already? Because I've been talking about this for a year, but I have a passion for transit over the years from all the places I've worked at. And I feel that the voice of transit customers is never really respected or heard the way it is for automobiles. Everyone cries out for more bridges, more tunnels, more lanes of traffic, but you really don't get that voice heard very well for more transit. So we have a professional planning development staff of planners, service planners and schedulers, long-range planning folks, data analytics in terms of keeping track of all the data from our customer perspective, that can stand up to New York City, MTA, Philadelphia SEPTA, LA Metro, Washington, anywhere. Our staff is as professional as any place else in the country. And I have to tell you, Tom, I'm so proud of the people that work in my department and help deliver every day. We put out 2,000 trips a day on 68 different bus routes. And without the service plan, the route planning, the bus stops, and the schedules, there is nothing. I mean, and they're fantastic. You're in good hands. It's time for me to move on and turn the reins over to someone else. We'll be in good hands looking down the road. We have high-capacity transit that we studied phase 1 in the city of Chesapeake. I've heard talk that Portsmouth is interested in high-capacity transit, and dare I say, even the new members of the Council of Virginia Beach are starting to ask the question, why don't we have light rail?
Yeah.
So this agency has a really bright future and a very talented staff at planning and development.
And finally, what are your plans in retirement?
Well, I'm moving to Colorado. I lived there when I worked for Denver RTD 28 years ago, so we're moving back in retirement. I plan to take a break and not talk transit, but I want to take up art. I want to learn. I want to be Bob Ross. I want to be able to. Isn't this a happy little scene? I want to be able to do that. I have to have that talent. So
we'll have you come in and autograph your Tide Light Rail paintings.
There are so many beautiful, majestic views in the greater Denver metropolitan area, the Rocky Mountains. It's really a beautiful state. Travel, both in the country. We already have my wife and I already have our first international trip planned for Iceland next year. We're going to see the total solar eclipse that you can see in Reykjavik in Iceland in August of 2026, but a lot of local travel in the greater west of this country. I will tell you, growing up in New York City, if you drove 8 hours, you can go through 11 states to get up to Maine. You drive 8 hours in Colorado, you're just on the other side of the state, on the other side of the mountains. It's a really big country, and you don't really appreciate it till you live out there, how big the states are in the western part of this country.
Well, Ray, thank you for all that you've done with HRT and the industry, and of course, representing us in front of the cities and putting us in a better place for the future. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Tom. It's been an honor and a privilege to work for this agency and to work for Mr. Harrell, Mr. Chiquette, and Mr. Towns, who have been the 3 CEOs here. I've had an opportunity to work with all of them. And the people like yourself and everyone else around here are really great. This agency has nothing but a bright future, as I can see. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you very much for joining us on the Move. And thank you for watching. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out.